Chapter 43, Treacle. They walked into the house, and the little shepherdess was waiting for them. She was standing where she always stood, the lamb at her feet, the tiny globe above her head, and a look on her face that said, "I know something you don't know." Flora's father took off his hat and bowed to the lamp. "George Buckman," he said, "how do you do?" "Hello?" Flora shouted into the silence of the house. From the kitchen came the sound of laughter. "Mom?" said Flora. No one answered. Flora's sense of foreboding deepened, expanded. And then her mother spoke. She said, "That's absolutely right, William." William? William? There was only one William that Flora knew. What would he be doing in the kitchen with a known arch nemesis? And then came the familiar rattle of the typewriter keys being struck, the thwack of the carriage return being hit. Ulysses' grip on her shoulder tightened. He let out a small chirp of excitement. Her mother laughed again. The laughter was followed by the truly terrifying words, "Thank you so much, William." "Shh," said Flora to her father, who was standing, listening, his hat in his hands, goofy smile on his face. There was a small, round drop of blood on his ear bandage. It looked oddly festive. "You stay here," Flora said to him. "Ulysses and I will go and check this out." Right, said her father. "You bet. I'll stay here." He put his hat on his head. He nodded. Flora, superhero on her shoulder, walked quietly, stealthily through the living room and into the dining room and stood before the closed kitchen door. She held herself very still. She made herself into a giant ear. She was getting extremely good at making herself into a giant ear. Flora listened, and she could feel Ulysses, his body tense and expectant, listening too. Her mother spoke. She said, "Yes, it will go like this. Frederico, I had a dream of you for eons." "No," said another voice, a high, thin, and extremely annoying voice. "I've dreamed of you for all eternity." "Ooh," said Flora's mother, "for all eternity, that's good, more poetic." Ulysses shifted his position on Flora's shoulder. He nodded. "Yes, exactly," said William Spiver, "more poetic." Eons sounds too geological. There's nothing romantic about geology, I assure you. Okay, said Flora's mother. "Right. What's next, William?" "Actually," said William Spiver, "if you don't mind, I would prefer to be called William Spiver." "Of course," said Flora's mother. "I'm sorry. What's next, William Spiver?" "Let me see," said William Spiver. "I suppose Frederico would say, 'And I have dreamed of you, Angelique, my darling. I must tell you that they were dreams so vivid and beautiful that I am loath to wake to reality.'" "Ooh, that's good. Hold on a sec." The typewriter key came to a clanking life. The carriage return dinged. "Do you think that's good?" Flora whispered to Ulysses. "Do you think that's good writing?" Ulysses shook his head. His whiskers brushed against her cheek. "I don't think so either," she said. Actually, she thought it was terrible. It was sickly, sweet nonsense. There was a word for that. What was it? Treacle. That was it. Having located the correct word, Flora felt a sudden need to say the word aloud. And so she did. She pushed open the kitchen door. She stepped forward. "Treacle," she shouted. "Flora?" said her mother. "Treacle," said William Spiver. "Yes," said Flora. She was pleased that with one simple word she had answered two very important questions. Yes, she was Flora, and yes, it was Treacle. Chapter 44, Her Treacherous Heart. William Spiver was wearing his dark glasses. There was a pitzer pop in his mouth. He was smiling. He looked exactly like a villain. That's what Flora's brain thought. But her heart, her treacherous heart, rose up joyfully inside of her at the sight of him. Flora's heart was actually glad to see William Spiver. There was so much she wanted to talk to him about. Pascal's wager, Dr. Measham and the other Dr. Measham, giant squids, giant donuts, and who was dunking them? If he had ever heard of the place called Blunder Me Sin, if he had ever sat on a horsehair sofa, but William Spiver was sitting beside Ulysses' arch nemesis, smiling. Obviously, he couldn't be trusted. "Florabelle?" said William Spiver. "It's me," said Flora. "I'm surprised you don't smell me, William Spiver, since you can smell everything." "I have never claimed to be able to smell everything. However, it is true that right now I am smelling squirrel." And there was another odor. "It is something sweet, some scent rodent of school lunchrooms and rainy Thursdays. What is it?" "Jelly, yes, grape jelly. I smell squirrel and grape jelly." "Squirrel," said Flora's mother. She turned away from the typewriter. She looked at Flora. "Squirrel," she said. "What in the world are you doing back here with that squirrel? I told your father—" "This malfeasance must be stopped," shouted Flora. Her mother, hands still poised over the keys of the typewriter, stared at Flora with her mouth open. William Spiver, for once, was silent. On Flora's shoulder, the squirrel trembled. Flora slowly raised her left arm. She pointed at her mother. She said, "What did you tell my father to do to the squirrel?" Her mother cleared her throat. "I told your father." But the sentence remained unfinished, the truth unuttered, because the kitchen door suddenly swung open to reveal Flora's father. "George Buckman," he said to the large room. "How do you do?" He walked into the kitchen. He stood beside Flora. "George, what in the world?" said Flora's mother. "You look like you've been in a battle." I'm fine. I was saved by the squirrel. I was attacked by Mr. Claus. He landed on my head, and—" "That's fascinating," said William Spiver, "but may I interrupt for a moment?" "Absolutely. Who is Mr. Claus?" "Mr. Claus is a landlord and also a cat. A large cat. Usually he attacks ankles. This time it was my head. My head! It was a very surprising attack. I wasn't prepared." "And?" said William Spiver. "Oh, yes, and Mr. Claus bit my ear, and there was a lot of pain, and the squirrel rescued me." "Have you lost your mind?" said Flora's mother. "I don't think so," said Flora's father. He smiled hopefully. "Can't you handle the smallest task? I asked you to take care of the squirrel situation." Flora felt a wave of anger roll through her. "Quit speaking euphemistically," she said. "Quit calling it the squirrel situation. You asked him to kill. You asked him to murder my squirrel." Ulysses let out a chirp of agreement, and then the kitchen became silent as a tomb. Chapter 45, 4 words. "It's the truth," Flora said. "You told Pop to kill Ulysses." Having denounced her mother, Flora now turned her attention to William Spiver and his betrayal. "What are you even doing here, William Spiver? Why are you in the kitchen with my mother?" "He's assisting me with my novel." William Spiver blushed, a bright and outer-worldly red. "I'm delighted that you find me of some assistance, Mrs. Buckman," he said. He took the Pitzer Pop out of his mouth and bowed in the direction of Flora's mother. "I must admit that I have always had a certain facility with words, and I'm terribly fond of the novel form, though my interests lie less in the area of romance and more in the speculative nature of things, science fiction, if you will, fact blended with fantasy, and extended meditation on the nature of the universe. Quirks, dwarf stars, black holes, and the like. Do you know, for instance, that the universe is expanding as we speak?" Only Ulysses responded to the questions. The squirrel shook his head vigorously, obviously amazed. William Spiver pushed his dark glasses up higher on his nose. He took a deep breath. "Speaking of expansion, did you know that there was now something like 90 billion galaxies in the universe?" In such a universe, it seems ridiculous and foolhardy to attempt creation on one's own, but still I persevere. You didn't answer my question, William Spiver, said Flora. Let me try again, he said. No, said Flora, you're a traitor, and you, she wheeled and pointed at her mother, are an arch nemesis, a true villain. Flora's mother crossed her arms. She said, I'm someone who wants what's best for you. If that makes me a villain, fine. Flora took a deep breath. I'm moving in with Pop, she said. What? Said her mother. Really? Said her father. Your father, said her mother, doesn't know how to take care of himself, much less someone else. At least he doesn't wish he had a lamp for a daughter, said Flora. I feel like I'm missing something, said William Spiver. I want to live with Pop, said Flora. Really? Said her father again. Go right ahead, said her mother. It would certainly make my life easier. Make my life easier. Those 4 words, so small, so simple, so ordinary, came flying at Flora like enormous slabs of stone. She actually felt herself tied sideways as they hit her. She put up a hand and held on to Ulysses. She used the squirrel to steady herself. Do not hope, she whispered. But she wasn't sure what it was that she wasn't hoping for. All she knew was that she was a cynic and her heart hurt. Cynics' hearts weren't supposed to hurt. William Spiver pushed back in his chair. He stood. Mrs. Buckman, he said, perhaps you would like to react or retract those words. They seem unnecessarily harsh. Flora's mother said nothing. William Spiver remained standing. Okay, then, he said. I will speak. I will attempt yet again to make myself clear, he paused. The only reason I am here, Florabelle, is that I came looking for you. You were gone a long time, and I missed you, and I wondered if you had returned. I came to find you. Flora closed her eyes. She saw nothing but darkness, and into this darkness slowly swam the other Dr. Measham's giant squid, moving sadly along, flailing in 8 lonely and enormous arms. I came to find you. What was it with William Spiver and the words he had said to her? Why did they make her heart squinch up? Seal blubber, said Flora. I beg your pardon, said William Spiver. Ulysses gently pushed against Flora's hand. And then the squirrel leaped away from her. Oh, no, said Flora's mother. No, not the... No, no, Ulysses flew over Phyllis Buckman's head. He went high, and then higher still. Yes, said Flora. Yes!